First of all, I would like to welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Ms. Nina Engels Domínguez will defend her academic thesis entitled The Locus COERULEUS Blueprint Towards Identifying Preclinical Alzheimer's Disease. I would like to invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusion of your thesis in the next 15 minutes, and I'd like to give you the word.
Thank you. Dear Pro-Rector, members of the Corona, colleagues, family, and friends, thank you all for being here today, whether in person or virtually. Today, I will share some key insights from the research I conducted during my PhD trajectory, which resulted in my dissertation titled The Locus COERULEUS, Blueprint Towards Identifying Preclinical Alzheimer's Disease. Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia, which is a broad term for a group of different conditions that gradually damage the brain's ability to function normally. Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. Alzheimer's disease typically develops after age 65 and is mainly known for causing memory loss. However, it also affects other mental abilities such as thinking, reasoning, and attention, which together we will refer to as cognitive decline. Over time, the disease starts to interfere with everyday tasks, eventually causing individuals to lose independence and requiring caregiver support in advanced stages. At this time, more than 32 million people are affected worldwide by Alzheimer's disease. As the global population continues to age, the disease is becoming a major public health concern, impacting not only patients, but also their caregivers and the economy. But what causes these symptoms? To understand Alzheimer's disease better, we need to look deep inside the brain and explore what happens as the disease progresses. Scientists and doctors have discovered that two types of harmful proteins build up in the brain cells of patients. The first protein is beta amyloid, which forms sticky clumps called plaques, which appear between brain cells. The second is tau, which builds up within the brain cells and gets tangled. Together, these harmful proteins damage billions of brain cells, block their ability to communicate with each other, and eventually kill them, which results in a shrunken brain and contributes to the cognitive decline seen in Alzheimer's disease. To study these early brain changes and their effects, we use advanced imaging techniques. PET scans can detect where and how much beta amyloid and tau are building up in the brain. MRI scans can create detailed pictures of the brain, showing its size and shape, and whether there are any areas that may have shrunk over time due to the loss of brain cells. They can also capture movies of how active the brain is while people are performing a task. Thinking, memory, and overall cognitive abilities are typically assessed with pen and paper tests. By repeating these neuropsychological tests over time, we can track changes in memory and thinking and identify early signs of cognitive decline. If you've noticed some forgetfulness in yourself, there's no need to be concerned just yet. As the top line of this graph illustrates, mild forgetfulness or slight cognitive decline is often part of normal, healthy aging. However, when aging takes an unhealthy turn, such as in Alzheimer's disease, the process can best be understood in stages of a continuum. Before reaching Alzheimer's disease, as shown on the far right, people often experience mild cognitive problems that do not yet interfere with their daily lives, as shown in the middle of the graph. Scientists have now also identified people who've shown patterns of beta amyloid and tau in their brain, but do not yet have any cognitive problems. Importantly, these changes in the brain can begin decades before memory problems are noticed by the individual or their loved ones. This stage, as seen on the left, is referred to as preclinical Alzheimer's disease. Here, you can see the largest part of the brain highlighted in blue. We call this the cortex. This is where the small but detectable changes in beta amyloid and tau have been identified. In summary, we've observed that some individuals will remain healthy, whereas others will go on and eventually develop Alzheimer's disease. Thus, it is very important to investigate this preclinical stage, as it may give us the opportunity to identify people who are at risk for Alzheimer's disease early and possibly intervene long before the disease begins to impact their lives. We've only recently learned that the harmful protein tau does not first appear in the cortex, but rather in the brainstem, the small tail-like part of the brain highlighted here in blue. Within the brainstem, tau builds up in a tiny yet critical area, roughly the size of a grain of rice. This area is called the locus coeruleus, which is Latin for blue spot. The locus coeruleus is an essential area because it sends signals throughout the entire brain and helps the brain to stay focused, respond to stress, and form memories. Nowadays, we can clearly visualize the locus coeruleus using MRI scans, since this brain region naturally appears as a bright, hyper-intense white signal, as shown in the section of the scan. This makes it easier for researchers to study this vital structure in detail. Since the locus coeruleus is involved in many cognitive functions affected early in Alzheimer's disease, and it is one of the earliest sites to build up tau proteins, studying this area could be helpful to provide critical insights into Alzheimer's disease. Therefore, our objective was to understand how the locus coeruleus is involved in early brain changes and early symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. This knowledge could then teach us whether the locus coeruleus can be used to identify individuals at risk for Alzheimer's disease. To fulfill our goal, we asked ourselves a couple of questions. Today, I will be focusing only on the questions covered in Chapter 3, 4, and 5. In Chapter 3, we focused on the activity of the locus coeruleus. We wondered whether locus coeruleus health during new experiences is linked to changes in memory and thinking over time. We also looked at whether this relation was influenced by beta amyloid. In Chapter 4, we focused on the structure of the locus coeruleus. Here we asked ourselves whether locus coeruleus health impacts brain shrinkage of the brain and whether beta amyloid and tau influence this. In Chapter 5, we again looked at the structure of the locus coeruleus. We were curious whether locus coeruleus health could predict the early buildup of tau in other brain regions and whether locus coeruleus health could predict which individuals would clinically progress in the long run. For the study in Chapter 3, we included 128 older individuals without memory problems. Participants first went into an MRI scanner and completed a task where they had to remember pairs of faces and names. Some faces were new, while other faces were faces they had seen before. This type of task is known to activate the locus coeruleus. Participants also had a PET scan, which helped us to see how much beta amyloid was in their brains. In addition, they completed cognitive tests, which were repeated every year for a period of 10 years. First, we verified whether the locus coeruleus became active while performing the task in the MRI scanner, which indeed turned out to be the case. Next, we found that when the locus coeruleus was less active during new experiences, indicating an unhealthy locus coeruleus, this was linked to faster memory and thinking decline over the next 10 years, as compared to people with more locus coeruleus activity. This was especially true for individuals with higher levels of beta amyloid. This suggests that the way that the locus coeruleus works may be important for preserving memory and thinking skills. In Chapter 4, we analyzed data from 165 older individuals. The participants underwent cognitive testing, which showed that about 10% of the participants had some mild memory problems. They also had MRI scans, allowing us to study the structure of the locus coeruleus and look for signs of overall brain shrinkage in these participants. Finally, PET scans were collected to evaluate beta amyloid and tau buildup in the brain. Individuals with an unhealthy locus coeruleus showed to have more brain shrinkage as compared to those with a healthy locus coeruleus, whose brain shrinkage levels were relatively stable. This effect was even stronger in individuals with higher levels of beta amyloid and tau. This suggests that an unhealthy locus coeruleus, combined with the buildup of these harmful proteins, contributes to the brain shrinkage similar to that seen in Alzheimer's disease. In Chapter 5, we investigated whether the locus coeruleus could serve as an early warning sign for Alzheimer's disease. To do this, we collected MRI scans, beta amyloid and tau PET scans, as well as cognitive tests from a group of participants. From this group, we selected 124 participants without memory problems and with low levels of beta amyloid in their brain. A key question in this chapter was whether the locus coeruleus could predict tau buildup in these individuals. But before discussing those results, let's first dive into how predictions work. Let's think of a test we're all very familiar with, the COVID-19 test. This test predicts who has COVID-19 and who has not. However, no test is perfect. Sometimes people are misclassified, meaning that they get the wrong result. By looking at how many people are correctly classified as having the disease and not having the disease, we can evaluate how accurate a test or predictor is. Now, let's return to our focus, the locus coeruleus. We found that the locus coeruleus was very effective at predicting tau buildup in the brain. In fact, it performed even better than other widely used measures that already exist, like brain shrinkage seen on MRI scans or beta amyloid levels from PET scans. Next, we collected clinical data over a period of 6 years to see if locus coeruleus health in the first year could predict clinical progression later. We found that those with an unhealthy locus coeruleus in year 1 had a higher risk of clinical progression, while those with better locus coeruleus health were less likely to progress. This suggests that the locus coeruleus could act as an early warning sign for preclinical Alzheimer's disease. In conclusion, Chapter 3 showed us that worse locus coeruleus health, as measured with less locus coeruleus activity, was related to faster cognitive decline. Then, using a measure of locus coeruleus structure, Chapter 4 revealed that worse locus coeruleus health was tied to more brain shrinkage. In Chapter 5, we once again used a measure of locus coeruleus structure, which revealed that worse locus coeruleus health was linked to more tau in the brain and a higher risk on clinical progression. Taken together, we can conclude that the locus coeruleus, or the health of the locus coeruleus, plays a key role in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease, with strong connections to both brain changes and symptoms. Thus, by measuring the health of the locus coeruleus with MRI scans, we can help spot the earliest signs of the disease even before symptoms appear. This allows us to identify individuals at risk for Alzheimer's disease much earlier. As shown in this overview, our findings highlight the locus coeruleus potential as an early warning sign for Alzheimer's disease. However, more research is needed before we can apply this in clinical practice. First, there are different methods for scanning the locus coeruleus, so it's important to standardize these scanning techniques across research sites for consistent results. Second, we need long-term studies with diverse groups of people to understand how the locus coeruleus changes over time. This will also help us to define clear criteria of a healthy and an unhealthy locus coeruleus. If future research succeeds in these points, brain scans of the locus coeruleus could be used as a non-invasive, quick, and relatively affordable tool to identify people at risk for Alzheimer's disease early. This could also improve prevention trials by helping researchers select participants more accurately. Furthermore, early detection of the risk of the disease would greatly benefit patients, caregivers, and the society by enabling timely treatments and interventions. The locus coeruleus also shows promise as a target for new pharmacological and non-pharmacological treatments in the early stages of the disease. However, more research is needed to determine the best ways and timings to treat the system. After addressing these questions, our findings could play an important role in improving the outcomes for individuals at risk for Alzheimer's disease and those already affected by the disease. With that, I would like to warmly thank you for your attention and yield the floor back to the pro-rector.
Thank you very much, Ms. Candidate, and also Ms. Domínguez for your clear presentation, well illustrated. Compliments for this. Before we start officially the opposition, I would like to first introduce your promotion team who guided you over the last years to reach this point this afternoon. And opposite of me are sitting Dr. Van Egro and Dr. Jacobs on the left side. They have been affiliated with the Department of Psychiatry and Neuropsychology at our university, and they guided you over the last 4 years, and I already thanked them for them. For the audience, we have today 6 members in the Corona. They are all on site, so we don't have any onliners, which makes it pretty easy. And I would like to start with the defense, giving the word to the chair of the assessment committee, which is Emeritus Professor Verhey, and he was professor in the department of he was professor in neuropsychiatry of old age psychiatry, and I'd like to give him the word.
Okay, thank you very much, dear pro-rector. Highly esteemed candidate, first, let me say I've read your thesis with great interest. It's about the search of the early changes in the brain and the early symptoms, signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, which is one of the central questions, of course, in the Alzheimer domain. At least when I started 40 years ago in the memory clinic, this was also a very central question. And so I think this is very relevant, especially also, as you mentioned, in the light of the new anti-amyloid trials, which are at best very modest. And I think the field is really asking for other targets and other ways to look. Your thesis about the blue spot. Locus coeruleum is an important contribution in the field in this long-lasting quest. It's timely, relevant, and offers high-quality research. And the fruits of it are all published in high-ranked journals. So I think it's top. And so again, I congratulate you with this. And of course, also the team, the supervisors, Dr. Heidi Jacobs and Dr. Maxime van Egro. Congratulations with this great achievement. And being a clinician myself, I especially like the chapters describing the potential clinical impact, clinical outcomes, so to say. That means chapters 5 and chapter 6, which you studied the association between locus coeruleus integrity on one hand and its association with cognitive decline and neuropsychiatric symptoms. So let me start asking one of your paranymph to read aloud proposition 5.
Advanced imaging technique assessing locus coeruleus norepinephrine system health enable the detection of the earliest pathophysiologic and symptomatologic changes associated with Alzheimer's disease, establishing it as a powerful tool for early detection and a crucial target for both pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical intervention.
Okay, thank you. So this is a bold statement. I think that I like it. The statement should be bold. It's powerful tool and a crucial target. So when testing the sensitivity and specificity of cognitive decline, it's important to look at the clinical outcome. You took the sum of boxes, CDR, Clinical Dementia Rating Scale, and I think the majority stayed the same. You out of 125, it's shown on page 228. You have the sum of boxes, CDR, and you see as an event they all had 0 and every change you took as an outcome, if I understand.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you so much for your compliments to start with, and I definitely agree that this is an exciting new field that we have with the locus coeruleus, so it's important to look at. To go to your question about the clinical dementia rating score, what we defined as an event was when the CDR sum of boxes was 0.5. So we had about 45 events. I think that was 36%, if I remember correctly, of the people who ended up declining somewhat.
Yeah, I think the most robust outcome would be the CDR in total, not the sum of boxes. Do you agree? The change. What I wanted to say is, what are you actually measuring? It's a change from 0 to half a point on an 18-point scale is not that strong outcome in a way. And did you do a kind of sensitivity analysis or a post hoc analysis and look only at those who actually changed, demonstrated the change in CDR total? And if you did so, what was the outcome of it?
Yeah, no, so we only looked at sum of boxes, I believe, because that was easier for kind of like categorizing the individuals.
And how stable were they? I can imagine if you have half a point, it's just only having one time at one point some complaints about your memory, but that can disappear after the next point.
Yeah. Well, overall, what we do with the clinical dementia ratings is that certified neuropsychologists review every case when there is a change in score to see if this makes sense based on their trajectory, but also whether it aligns with the opinions of their study partner and what they basically observe in their partner. So I would say overall they were stable in that sense. I do think that one of the things that would be beneficial for this chapter and for future research is to have longer follow-up times to definitely see whether people are not converting back to a 0 score and see how much they're even, what's the word? Not improving, but declining even more. Because like you say, 0.5 is still modest, so we're hoping to see more, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And
I do have to, I'm sorry, I do have to interrupt because we have to proceed.
Time is over?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm sorry. So we have to proceed. We have 6 opponents, and I would like to move to the next opponent. Is Emeritus Professor Salmon. He is Professor in Neuroimaging of Memory and Cognitive Readaptation at the University of Liège. I would like to welcome him, and he was also a member of your assessment committee, and I'd like to give him the word.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hello. So I think effectively we need to congratulate for this work. When we started, at the time, Alzheimer's was considered as an hippocampal disease, and that's enough. And then Braque came and described a little bit of locus coeruleus, but anyway, the cortex was more important. So I think you are in an area of this is very important. So the little point for me would be that you are looking at preclinical Alzheimer's pathology because your people have got no disease for the time being, but that's a global thing that everybody is telling. That may be a semantic discussion. So you combined and you mastered a lot of important state-of-the-art techniques, and really that's extremely important. So in the short time I'm allowed to come in, I've got a statistical question first. So your chapter 2 is about the state-of-the-art imaging of the different structures. And then you, of course, make reference to previous publications. And one of those publications is telling that a lower functional connectivity between the ventral tegmental area and the left hippocampus was associated to less hippocampal volume, and worse memory performance when putting both healthy people and AD people. And what the author said is that in each group by itself there was no correlation between this kind of relationship and memory. And they said, well, this is possibly due to lower statistical power. Mm-hmm. But do you think there is another explanation to get a correlation in a group of healthy people and AD apart from statistical power, which could be the trick of getting a correlation with no correlation, for example, in the AD?
Highly esteemed opponent. Thank you so much for traveling all the way from Belgium. I really appreciate that. If I understand the question correctly, there were different relationships observed in a preclinical group and a AD group. And the question is whether there is
when you put those together, you obtain a correlation, mm-hmm. But when you take the two groups, disease, not disease, there is no correlation at all. How could you explain that apart from low statistical power?
I would expect that. Give me 1 second to think about this.
Is there another way than correlation?
I think relationships can cancel each other out. So maybe if we have two different groups, this correlation isn't, because it's two different groups, but you could almost see that as a timeline, right? So it makes sense that you would have a correlation starting from the preclinical going to the more deceased population. But of course, if you look at the group separately, that time component is not in there.
Absolutely. So you just make a difference between groups, mm-hmm. and the correlation is just coming as a difference. Mm-hmm. So obviously, that's not the best way to relate it. Yeah. Thank you. I've got a second methodological question. That's for your chapter 3. Where you do have the locus coeruleus function, and what you say in your methodology is that you decided to take regions of interest, mm-hmm. and take the hippocampus. Okay, the hippocampus is so complex, so many things, that just telling me that's coming from free surfer is not enough for me. Mm-hmm. Could you please a little bit elaborate on how did you take those regions of interest in the hippocampus? What did you take exactly?
Yeah, of course. So, of course, one of the regions of interest was the locus coeruleus, but we were also interested in regions that are all around the medial temporal lobe, because we see that that is one of the first places that is impacted with the pathology of Alzheimer's disease, especially in such a preclinical population as we were looking into. So that would be more the explanation on like a kind of like a biological level. What we also did is that we looked at what the locus coeruleus was connecting with functionally, and then took that as a basis to do the rest of the analysis on.
But what did you take exactly in the hippocampus?
Sorry?
What did you take in the medial temporal lobe? Mm-hmm. Which is the technique to decide what the region you take, which are they? How do you know where you are? The hippocampus has got so many, Hammond horn, mm-hmm. The dentate gyrus. Did you take all those different regions? Is that a big region?
Yes, we took the entire hippocampus. We did not subsegment it in subfields or anything. Yeah.
Okay, and did you visually check what your free surfer black box is doing?
I personally didn't, because the data is already processed for this chapter, but we can definitely overlay it. I know that the people who process the data can overlay it with the atlas that we have on file. I think it's a Thaler atlas, and we overlay it to see that nothing went wrong with the skill stripping and with kind of like the registration alignment, to make sure that all the structures are indeed the structures that we say they are.
Okay, point taken. And then I would like to go to a pathophysiological question on your chapter 4, which is, so lower in vivo locus coeruleus integrity is associated with lower cortical thickness in older individuals with Alzheimer's pathology. So you do analysis, and what you say is that examining the neurodegenerative changes associated with changes in locus coeruleus integrity in older individuals should increase our understanding on the consequences of early to accumulation and provide insights into the role of locus coeruleus in the pathophysiologic cascade model of Alzheimer's disease. Do you think that your correlation analysis allow to answer the questions of this hypothesis?
If the analysis answers the
You
question?
make correlation analysis in your chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that allow you to answer questions on the cascade hypothesis?
Excellent question, thank you. I think one major drawback of this chapter is that all the data is cross-sectional, so we cannot really draw any temporal inferences from this. That being said, we do know from a lot of post-mortem data how the pathology spreads at certain, like if we have, if we are at this age, then we know, okay, the majority of the people already have tau in the LC accumulated, or they already have tau in the entorhinal cortex accumulated. So we do know a lot of information from that, but I do agree that we cannot really obtain temporal inferences from this. And what I would love to do is to have a longitudinal study to be able to do that, but we all know that that is a little bit more challenging in research, of course.
Thank you very much. So we have to continue. And we continue to Dr. Falgas. She is involved as neurologist at the Hospital Clinic of Barcelona. And I would like to thank her that she joins us today live from Barcelona. I give you the word.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a privilege to take part on this defense and engage with the work that you have compiled in this thesis. I would like to congratulate the candidate because of the high quality work that has been published in high impact journals, and also extend the congratulations to the supervisors and the whole team. That said, I would like to build up on the questions that my esteemed colleagues have already raised, but trying to focus, starting with the proposition 2. I would ask one of the panelists to read it, if possible, please.
MRI-derived measures of the locus coeruleus integrity outperform traditional biomarkers in identifying individuals at risk for Alzheimer's disease.
So the Alzheimer's disease field has been very centered in amyloid positivity to confirm Alzheimer's disease or determine AD risk in the future. And actually the current clinical criteria to diagnose still sustain this kind of a consensus, scientific-wide consensus. How do you explain or fit this statement that LC is a marker by itself to determine the risk, omitting the amyloid positivity?
Mm-hmm. Esteemed opponent, thank you so much for your question. Thank you so much for traveling all the way from Barcelona. I really appreciate that. Okay, so regarding the question on what is the rationale in being able to predict something like amyloid, which is more present in Alzheimer's disease. I do want to say first that preclinical Alzheimer's disease has been defined for years by indeed the presence of amyloid. I do think that the whole definition of Alzheimer's disease is dynamic, is evolving, and we know that recently new literature came out suggesting that maybe we should rethink or rephrase that definition, and that tau should also be part of this definition. That being said, we know that tau in the entorhinal cortex is already able at sub-threshold levels of amyloid to predict future amyloid levels and also clinical progression. So the fact that we can then use DLC to predict that tau means that we were a step earlier in that whole timeline, which I think is the most important thing what we can do right now in the field of Alzheimer's disease.
Great, thank you. I would also like to address chapter 6 in this work that is under preparation, right? I think it's not published yet. You established this correlation between the LC metrics and the affective or stress-related symptoms. There have been limited literature on this, and somehow this literature is conflicting. Mm-hmm. How do you think your work advances in this prior literature in helping kind of understanding better this relationship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, first of all, on that topic, there isn't a lot of literature. I can count the papers on one hand. So I think the difference between those papers and our paper is that those were in clinical populations, while we once again did that step back to a healthy population. I would even say this chapter is a little different than all the other chapters in my thesis, because now we looked at a sample that was a lifespan sample, so it's even earlier. Yeah, I would say this is a preclinical population, to say it like that, and hopefully with that population we would be able to predict more the preclinical.
Great. And in relationship to the neuropsychiatric symptoms, but now shifting towards the chapter 5, mm-hmm. In this, the participants that were included in this study were selected excluding the geriatric depression score that was over 11. Mm-hmm. In the context of this link with neuropsychiatric symptoms and LC degeneration, do you think that that was appropriate, or you could also embrace these ones with elevated GDS score, because they might have mm-hmm. higher LC degeneration?
Yeah, no, that is an excellent question. We indeed saw a relationship between LC integrity, and a negative relationship between LC integrity and depressive symptoms. So we would have expected that would influence the relation that we saw overall. Which surprisingly was not the case, because we ran the analysis both with the individuals with depressive symptoms and without, and the results stayed the same, even though we did see that relationship between locus coeruleus integrity and depressive symptoms. So it could be that perhaps the depressive symptoms were not luckily strong enough, that maybe they were very mild, and that would change if people were way more depressed. But in this case, we did not see that.
Thank you for your answers. I think, yeah, we are about time, right? Okay.
Thank you very much. Then the opposition will be followed by Professor Kotz. She was also a member of your assessment committee, and she's professor in neuropsychology and translational cognitive neuroscience at our university, and I'd like to give her the word.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, first of all, I'm super impressed by this incredible piece of work. It's particularly exciting for me, remembering Nina as someone who came through my lab searching for the right topic for the future, and it seems you have really landed, and that is certainly also due to the fantastic interaction with your team. So congratulations to all of you. I have specific questions regarding Chapter 3, and it somehow has already come up a little bit. It's an incredibly meaningful approach to start looking at preclinical conditions. But of course, the question of generalizability comes up very quickly. You seem to have a very strong idea about this being sort of a linear evolution from preclinical to MCI and then AD. The question is it truly a gradient, or do we also potentially start looking at a threshold? And I'm asking that in relation to the fact that you seem to have specifically looked at beta amyloid, but not at tau in this particular experiment. Now, my question here is, what is the chicken and what is the egg? You seem to be saying tau is quite relevant in the locus coeruleus. So what triggers and what is ultimately the bullet of saying this is MCI and has potential for Alzheimer's disease? So that's kind of a first and second question combined.
Sorry. Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. Thank you for the compliments as well. I think this is the $1 million question. I think we see that the effects of tau and amyloid kind of like reinforce each other. Yeah, they reinforce each other. So I honestly don't know which one would be first in that sense. I know we were not able to fully capture that in this chapter just because we did not have the tau data on the PET scans available because we also had locus coeruleus scans in that sense. Then we have the additional complexity that we cannot measure tau with PET scans in the locus coeruleus because of target binding. What we are standing at right now is that we kind of need to figure out the answer to this question with a lot of proxies, which complicates it, but I would not be able to tell you the answer.
Okay. Would you care to speculate? Because there are some ideas out there. So people have actually talked about beta amyloid being upstream of tau, and then this is really triggering the pathogenesis of AD, and that then it triggers the conversion of tau to be toxic, right, or become abnormal. But then there are other people who say, well, amyloid beta can also enhance toxicity via feedback loops, for example. So maybe it's not so much the chicken and the egg, but maybe it's also something to reflect in terms of who is actually really developing or not, depending on what the dynamics are.
I think from the research that I did, it is very easy to go to the explanation of if you have tau in the locus coeruleus, this will probably lead to hyperactivity in the locus coeruleus because of those insults of the tau pathology, which may spread the tau to the rest of the cortex. This is, of course, not proven, but I'm speculating, at least not in humans. And so I would say that the fact that we have that tau in the locus coeruleus will be the catalysator. But I know that a lot of people in the field actually think the opposite. But yeah, no, if I had to choose, I would say it is because of tau.
Okay, cool. So ultimately, would you agree that only together we start seeing distinct behavioral symptom change in Alzheimer's disease? Or from the data as it is right now, your preclinical data, you have kind of very isolated behavioral changes, and they could mean anything, right?
Mm-hmm. When you say together...
So if you have both accumulations of plaques and tangles as an outcome, would you then say you start seeing behavioral symptom changes that are specific to Alzheimer's disease? And what you see right now is potentially, how telling is the behavioral result right now?
Yeah, no, I think it is indeed a combination of both. We do know from postmortem studies that once amyloid kicks in and tau gets out of the temporal lobe, this is the moment that we have those cognitive symptoms. So I definitely think this is a combination of both. I also do think that we think very easily in a amyloid negative and an amyloid positive, just because that is the easy language for PET scans. But that is, of course, not exactly the case. This is just about the detection, right? So even if you are amyloid negative, you do have a little bit of amyloid pathology in the brain. With PET scans, we measure more the fibrillar variants of amyloid. Well, right now we're thinking that the oligomers of amyloid might be even more toxic. So having those already having an effect, but we can simply not detect them, probably means that it is a combination of both that we should take into account. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. And I hand back to the prorector.
Thank you very much. Then the opposition will be continued by Professor Poser. I would also like to thank him that he's the secretary of my team here this afternoon. He is also a member of your assessment committee, and he's professor in MR methods for neuroscience at our university. And I'd like to give him the word.
Yeah, thank you, Prorector. Yeah, dear candidate, first of all, I would like to join the others here on the compliments on your thesis. It's super impressive what you've gathered in this already very thick book. Not just in terms of words, but also methodology, modalities coming together, and also the sheer amount of literature that you've reviewed and into which context you're trying to critically place your own work here. And I think it goes without saying that, I mean, your work is obviously addressing one of the most important health questions, as we've heard, but at the same time also one of the most important societal and not least economical questions, I think, that we need to deal with. Now, as an MR physicist, of course, I mean, especially in the context of the breadth of all the stuff you talk about, I was very charmed to see that MR holds promise, as we heard from Proposition 2, to serve as a screening tool to identify individuals at risk of developing Alzheimer. I thought, well, that's cool. And I have to, on a personal note, actually say I'm kind of proud that I was involved in Heidi's early work with Nikos, and we've somehow managed to make that sequence that has meanwhile been used to scan thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, to help you and others in the quest of answering these questions. Now, of course, one question that remains for me is, what are we actually measuring with it? I mean, there's a small hypertense spot, I think, was first thought to be sort of measured like neuromelanin, some cell density sort of thing, maybe in relation to copper and other stuff that comes out of them. But I guess, meanwhile, the hypothesis is that we are also measuring sort of just macromolecules in general, lipids and water, but also tau itself. So what, in your words, are we actually measuring, really?
Yeah. Highly esteemed opponent. Thank you for the compliments. Thank you very much for creating the LC sequence, because otherwise you would not be standing here today. Excellent question. Like you said, the locus coeruleus has this neuromelanin component, which generates this hyper-intense signal on the locus coeruleus MRI sequences. And for a long time, we were calling these sequences neuromelanin-sensitive sequences. And thanks to that neuromelanin, we were able to delineate the locus coeruleus way easier, right? Now, like you said, there's more research right now that indicates that it could also be lipids, it could also be water, it could also be pathology. And to make it even more complicated, it can also vary with age, location, disease. So this is a question that I don't know the answer to, but I'm pretty sure the rest of the locus coeruleus field doesn't either. Now, I do think that we have a lot of steps to make in this to kind of clarify that biological contrast or tissue source that we have from that signal. What I could think of is that we should investigate more microstructural properties of the tissue. So maybe looking at MPM sequences, the multiparametric sequences, or maybe naughty sequences would be helpful as well to clarify that signal.
Yeah, thank you. Those are very good thoughts already, actually preempting what I was going to ask you next, because after this wonderful proposition 2, which says, okay, MR is great, we can do things on an individual level, really comes in a reality check, right? I mean, you're referring to the literature, which by itself doesn't really seem to agree on itself. I mean, starting on page 48, for example, you say some find this inverted U shape and the signal intensity with age, you know, in the Locus coeruleus intensity or the relation to Alzheimer, and some you know, there's a lot of variation in the literature, which indeed makes me think we've got work to do. I mean, we being you guys, actually trying to make sense of the signals, but then also we, on the physics side, to give you better tools at hand to maybe ultimately achieve the goal that you're going for. So what would be your wish list for me and other physicists to really focus on next? Which directions? You've mentioned some already. Is it functional? Is it structural? Is it diffusion, microstructure? What are you hoping for?
Yeah, definitely microstructure, the diffusion as well. I think what would be important as well to see is because we see this, we see kind of this inverted U curve in the hyperintense signal of those sequences, but we tend to only see that in 3 Tesla sequences, and we don't see that in 7 Tesla sequences. So I think it's also very important to have direct comparisons between the same person going into both scanners and see like, hey, what is the difference? Because there we know the tissue is not going to change. So that would be another future direction that would be highly interesting. Another future direction, I wasn't sure if you meant just for the biological tissue or the source of the biological tissue, but another thing that I would be very excited about for LC imaging in general is to work more on validating it in postmortem tissue, like our imaging sequences in postmortem tissue, because we do see that our templates do not register or do not really perceive the caudal part of the LC. Locus coeruleus, I'm sorry, I'm abbreviating this all the time. So that is another future direction that I would love to explore.
Yeah, thank you.
There's no time.
No time, I feared so. Thank you very much for your questions. I give the word back to you in that case.
Thank you very much. So we proceed with the opposition and we go to Dr. Ramakers. She's assistant professor in psychiatry and neuropsychology, and I also like to give her the opportunity to discuss with you.
Thank you, Rector. Dear candidate, first of all, I would also like to congratulate you with this very nice piece of work. Well done, and also my congratulations to your supervision team. So I think it's a very relevant and very innovative topic. I also want to look with you a bit to chapter 3, in which you have investigated the LC activity related to cognitive decline in a cohort over 10 years. So I think that is very, very nice. And you used the PAC score. So the preclinical Alzheimer's cognitive compound score. And I want to discuss a little bit with you about how is this composite built. And I also saw that you didn't use the same compound in chapter 3 and chapter 6. There is a little bit of difference how it is built. So what are we measuring? That is the question.
Esteemed opponent, thank you so much for your question and your compliments. So the PEC score was originally designed to be very sensitive to cognitive decline that is related to, or amyloid-related cognitive decline, so really for the preclinical stages. I know there are multiple versions, so overall, I believe we've used the newest version, which we call the PEC 5. And now I do not fully remember by heart, but I think it consisted of the digits symbol substitution test, a part of the verbal fluency of the FAS test. I think the logical memory delayed. The free and cute selective reminding test, and then there's one other that I'm blanking out on. And what we normally do is that we z-score the total scores and then take the average for that. Now.
And then, what do you have then? When you take the mean of all these different cognitive functions?
I mean, then we have a summary measure or summary metric, a composite score of how their cognitive performance is overall.
Yeah, so you say then you have a general cognitive score, yeah. And I was then thinking, what is this compound score saying about cognition? So let's say you have a very well memory, but a very bad mental speed, then the mean is on average. So then your cognition is okay, but, well, we can discuss about that.
Yeah.
So maybe I would then make the comparison with when you are measuring vitamins in blood, and you have a very high vitamin C and a very low vitamin B, then we would say vitamins are okay.
No, that's a very fair point. I do think that the tests that we put in the PEC represent different domains of cognition. So hopefully that we're kind of like canceling out if, you know, or not including one domain or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you use also a cognitive, let's say, healthy cohort. So I think then it is not a big point because you do not expect very large impairments in cognitive functioning, and then this compound score will be a fair score. But I think in clinical cohorts, yeah, it's quite difficult, and it's more the way of it's often used, but it's more the way of thinking. What are we measuring now? What are where are we looking at? So another question related to that is that you use this 10-year follow-up, and there was some dropout, which is completely normal in such a long cohort. Do you have any ideas about what that did with your findings? Was it dropout related to which factors, or was it completely due to the fact that it is an ongoing cohort?
So overall, this is referring to chapter 3, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So in chapter 3, we used a sample from the Harvard Aging Brain Study. Overall, we see that the participants in that sample are really motivated. So. There are not a lot of people who tend to drop out. Of course, we do have dropout. I would say the biggest reason is unfortunately because people pass away, because we have already been obtaining data for 10 years. But there are, of course, other reasons, maybe time commitment, etc. But those numbers are relatively low. Could you remind me of the second part of the question?
Yeah, so how did it affect your results, maybe this dropout?
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
Yeah, so we did use linear mixed effects models, so that should take into account that we have different numbers of time points for different people. So that is a strength of that statistical model. So I would expect.
So you already made a correction for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Very nice. Maybe I want to go to another chapter in this, which is chapter 6 about the anxiety symptoms. And there I have the question, you found this relation with anxiety, but not with the other neuropsychiatric symptoms. And could you have an explanation for this? Or was this what you did expect? So specific, this anxiety symptom?
That is an excellent...
Dear Ms. Candidate, you are allowed to finish your answer, but you also can choose not to answer and finish. It's up to you.
Respectfully, I will not finish the answer.
Okay, very well. Dear Ms. Engels Domínguez, the time appointed for defending your thesis has now officially passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss not so much the quality of your thesis that has been approved, but particularly the way you have defended your thesis this afternoon. And I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and the return to the aula. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. I know what's on the line. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Get the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Dear Miss Candidate, dear Miss Engels Domínguez, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and in particular the way you have defended your thesis this afternoon. And in view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you officially the degree of doctor. Dr. Jacobs is authorized to confer upon you these academic distinctions in accordance with Dutch university custom, and I invite your supervisor now to take the floor. I give you the word.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible? By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confirm upon you, Nina Engels Domínguez, the degree of doctor, and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university.
I give the word to Dr. Van Echel for a second certificate.
So, on behalf of the Research Institute of MENS, I'm entitled to hand out this official certificate. The owner of this certificate has received training in a broad range of academic skills and has gained experience that is relevant for a successful career as an independent scholar.
Give now the word to Dr. Jacobs to start with the first laudatio.
Dear Dr. Engels Domínguez, Nina, congratulations. This is an amazing day. It's the day where you've been working for so hard these last 4 years, but actually longer than 4 years. Many people here may not know this, but our first meeting was here in my office in Maastricht on May 7, 2018, which is almost 7 years ago. At that time, you were in your research master's degree, looking for an internship, and Nina knew exactly what she wanted. She wanted to do fMRI in Alzheimer's disease, but not just work with an existing data set. You came in and said, I actually want to be involved in data collection, and I want to preferably do this in the Martino Center in Boston. It's quite a wish list. But luckily, I was in Boston, so a couple of emails, and a few months later, you were in Boston starting your internship on Locus Aurelius activity during novelty. I threw a lot of new things at you. Programming in R, MATLAB, modeling linear, non-linear longitudinal data, learning fMRI. But I quickly learned that I didn't have to worry. You loved those challenges. And when you didn't know the answer, you and Fred, which was our research assistant at that time, you would figure it out. Now, during that time, I also had a chance to get to know you better personally. And I learned that you love the coding puzzle, figuring out code. And I could also clearly see the perfectionist and your excellent organizational skills in your thesis. But even more importantly, you were always positive-minded, smiling, making friends easily. And I know now that you have an enormous heart. All of those friends you made during those 7 years, those are friends for life. And you will travel across the world to be there for them. You will travel to India, to Spain, San Diego, it doesn't matter. So when I started my own lab in Boston a few years later, I knew I wanted you to be part of it. And that was the best decision I ever made. You took on all IRB-related issues, recruitment, data collection of the Locus project, while at the same time working on your own research projects for your dissertation. And you did this in close interaction with our first postdoc at that time, which was Procopis. And I remember during COVID, the three of us had these hour-long data discussions over Zoom, with crazy ideas on how to model data, which ultimately became this beautiful Nature Communications paper. Now, throughout all of those different projects, I can say that you became the expert in our lab for building these very complex 4-in-4 loops that just were repetitive. And these loops, they would spit out these enormous tables with all required statistical values along with figures, and you would bring them then to the lab meeting, followed with a big banner over the table, no results. And you were smiling, hoping to get feedback. It would discourage many, but you were not afraid to just research, to learn, and to dig deep. And I think that is one of the most valuable values that you embrace. It's the trajectory that matters. It's not so much the end result. And this has led now to this beautiful thesis with many high-impact, innovative publications. Now, over time, our lab grew, and you were ready to take on a bigger role in the lab. You became our central person, our project manager, and that was, again, the right decision for me to take, because all of those qualities is what makes our lab so wonderful. You brought structure, organization with a color system, and I know now that nobody loves yellow. You lead our team with positivity, generosity, great care, and with love for the salmon avocado sandwich from Tati, despite sometimes some struggles with a knife, which I think has been solved now. So when I became a PI in Boston, I sometimes felt like being in this mother role, because you came all the way from the Netherlands to the US, so I felt very responsible. Wanted to make sure you were eating enough, because Boston is so expensive. Wanted to make sure you were not working too much. But now that you became a lab manager, often it feels like co-parenting, where we are taking care together of our clinical research coordinators, distributing work. And I probably don't say this often enough, but I'm so grateful that I can co-manage our lab with you. That doesn't mean I stop worrying when I see you typing messages on Team in the middle of the night. But Nina, I am incredibly proud of what you have achieved in these years, in the midst of COVID, being a lab manager, and I look forward to continue to work with you in Boston. But first, I would say enjoy your well-deserved vacation here in Europe, in St. Martin. Let your Locus Aurelius calm a little bit, not fire physically too much. And I also want to congratulate not only you, of course, but also your parents, your family, and your boyfriend, Roger.
Dear Nina, speaking right after ID is not an easy task, as she has already so nicely highlighted everything that makes this day so special and what makes you and your achievement truly unique. But still first, I would like to emphasize again the outstanding accomplishment that you earned. Indeed, steering a PhD to completion is already a challenging journey, but doing so while managing the many responsibilities of being the lab project manager is nothing short of extraordinary. Throughout these years, you have captained both ships with skill, resilience, and determination, navigating through the waves, sometimes tsunamis, of never-ending deadlines, unexpected obstacles, and daunting challenges. Yet, you always kept your eyes on the horizon, and you always remain committed to going above and beyond to overcome these hurdles. But importantly, as every great captain knows, a journey isn't just about the hard work. It's also about the unforgettable moments along the way. And how the Locus Cerebrus gods surely know that we've had such amazing moments over the past few years. From fancy cocktail parties and oversized ice cream in San Diego, to discovering the best tacos ever on a rooftop in Philadelphia. From enjoying a refreshing drink during a warm summer evening near a canal in Amsterdam, to busting moves on the dance floor with some very famous scientists who shall remain unnamed. From the frequent feasts of delicious pizzas in Boston, to sipping pina coladas around the pool in Puerto Rico, of course always with moderation, I truly, truly hope that this adventure has been for you just as much about the experiences as the destination. And all the blue spotters will agree that you have always been, and you always are, the key element, the leading figure, and the driving force behind creating those incredible memories. Lastly, I would like to ask you, do you remember what you said last week when Tim asked, what are you most looking forward to about your PhD defense? Not a surprise for some, but without a single doubt in your mind, you immediately said, party. So with that, I wish you the best, most well-deserved party to properly celebrate such an incredible achievement. Congratulations again, Nina, and I give back the word to the Prorector.
Well, dear Dr. Engels Domínguez, I am one of the first, but also to officially use your new title. And I would like to congratulate you on the board of directors of our university. And in my congratulations, of course, also take your promotion team who guided you. In my congratulations, I always take the family who are sitting here in front of us. Also, congratulations. And I would also like to thank the members of the Corona who are here today. And they had the opportunity to ask you questions, maybe some tough questions, but you answered all questions in a very nice way. And again, I would like to stipulate to you that we came to a unanimous positive decision, so you really did a great job, and I'd like to compliment you with this. By saying this, I think we're going to close. For the closure, I'm going to use my hammer, which you haven't seen, but it's right here. And officially, I close the ceremony, and I would like to mention how to proceed. We're going to make a picture on the stairs of our university with the new young doctor. And you already can go to the rafter. That's the place where there are some bakeries, some beer, some wine, some coffee, whatever you want. And we will follow you in about 5 to 6 minutes. Thank you very much.